As the prophet of esports, I rely on trustworthy and meaningful data every day. Data from our research partner, YouGov, offers the most complete view of esports fans and gamers in the world, providing context to who they are, what they think, the brands they buy, and things they do. YouGov's connected insights and research services inform strategy at every level. If you're a team, a brand, agency, or rights holder, you should be talking with YouGov. Their partners measure and maximize ROI and are telling compelling stories with data. Visit yougov.com/gaming-esports to learn more. This was a big story, and it was a report that came from Reuters. And the headline here is Netflix planning to enter the gaming industry with subscription-based gaming service. So we had talked on previous podcasts about Netflix showing interest in the gaming market, wanting to potentially get into the gaming market. Obviously, they've done gaming shows. Now it seems to be all but confirmed, at least the rumors seem to come from a very legitimate source here, that they will have an unlimited, essentially, games offering for a monthly fee, as with, the typical Netflix subscription. And the only thing else out there really that looks and feels like that today, guys, correct me if I'm wrong, is like an Xbox Game Pass. But this is, I found really interesting. And Zach, I know you had, as we were talking before we started recording the podcast, I know you guys have had some interesting thinking around games, like all you can eat game subscriptions. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on Netflix getting into this potentially and how it fits with GG Circuit.
Yeah. So the other one that I think of that LAN centers ask us about a lot is the Ubisoft has like a pass that you can buy that gets a lot of their titles, if not all of them, under one subscription. And so a lot of centers will say, can't we just buy that for all the PCs, right? And then have that for each of the PCs. The one key that I see in all of this is that a lot of these, it's going to be like herding cats for Netflix, right? Like we all know what it's like to try to track down someone at Valve or Steam to work with them on something, right? And some of the publishers are easier to work with than others, but money talks, right? Like where the money funnels into the system and the dollar number that funnels in a lot of times is what's going to probably move the needle with some of those publishers. So, my thought is, can Netflix get, I don't know what the price point will be, but 10 or 15 or 20 bucks, can't be much more than that, right? If somebody puts their credit card in, we all know we've got those subscriptions for all the other streaming services. I got 8 of them that are all like between $5 and $12, right? But so that's the magic point. Can you take that from 1 million or 5 million or 10 million gamers to start and get somebody like Activision Blizzard, who are extremely close to chest with their IP, extremely hard to work with for bigger projects like this? Like you got to go sign one of those publishers, the hardest ones first, right? And go to market with them. Yep. So that's the biggest thing for us. We've also done, we've done stuff in our network where we've made Battlefield available on licenses working with EA to all of our LAN centers in the network, where they didn't have to buy the game. The players didn't have to buy the game, and they just went to a LAN center, launched the game, and could play. They would be like GG Circuit 102 would be their player name, right? And then the next time they log in, they get a different one, and somebody sold their armor or whatever. And eventually they get frustrated and they buy the game. That's the whole purpose, right? So we've done that before. It's technologically not a problem. We've dreamed of the day of being able to do that, but we've always ran into problems at the publisher, always. And we've got great contacts and great friends there, and they're like, there's no way we're getting this by our attorneys. That's always where it gets stuck.
I mean, it makes so much sense, Zach, for you guys to bundle with your software, right? Like an all-you-can-eat subscription so that the centers don't have to worry about that. I guess, William, my question for you is, to Zach's point, is there a price point at which you think Netflix will be able to get all these publishers on board? Because we've seen this happen with music and movies, right? Yeah. And the first ones to do it, like Apple, was notorious. Steve Jobs, I think, had to practically, beg and plead to get all these music publishers sort of on board with Apple Music originally. And it was not easy, especially being the first. What do you think Netflix will hit a reasonable price point here? And do you think they'll be able to get all the publishers under one roof?
I have so many thoughts about this. It could fill a podcast by itself. So I got to be focused here on a couple
Okay.
things. I think I first want to talk up. I'm not super bullish on this working for Netflix. And
Interesting.
that's a hot take. It is not because I am not bullish on a game subscription model. It's not because of that. I'm extremely bullish on it. I'm not saying Netflix can't make it work, but I want to do the pros and cons column for them. The pros are pretty simple. They have basically everybody in the gaming demographic in most countries already subscribed to Netflix. Like, I'm guessing if you're 18 to 30 years old, you have a Netflix subscription right now. That's why they're making the Witcher TV show for Netflix. It's because they know you, they know their audience, you're there, right? So they have a massive, instantaneous ability to put this offering in front of people and convert. And because they're going to get great scale, I'm pretty confident they can get a great price point for this, right? Because they're going to be able to rely on a lot of users signed up in the beginning. And if they've been able to, if they have the scale to negotiate a good price point for movies and TV, right, they'll probably be able to get a good price point. Games, I don't think we're talking, I don't want to speculate on pricing, but I think the pricing will be competitive, whatever it is. So I think that's massive pros. So why then, William, would you say, well, you're not super bullish on this? You're not like, oh my God, this is a home run. It's because of two things. One is, I think everyone assumes Netflix will win in their new markets because Netflix was first in the the movie market, TV market, right? Netflix is not first here, right? Like, and in particular, I think Game Pass as a competitor cannot be underrated here. Cannot be underrated because once you have one subscription feature for this, I dispute that this is like movies and TV. We're going to end up signing up for 4 or 5 subscription services. I think you're going to have one baseline. You're going to cherry pick the other titles and games because that's still the offering that's based on here. So I have real concerns about the entrenchment of their competitors, but I have a bigger concern here. And the bigger concern I have is for me to go, oh my gosh, they're going to knock this out of the park. This announcement would have to be paired with Netflix opening game studio. Because Netflix has shown us that the secret to their sustained subscription model is owned content, right? That's why they spend literally billions of dollars developing content every year. And I find it difficult to believe. That after, say, Microsoft has just bought Bethesda, right? And walked all that stuff exclusively as a carrot to their platform, that all these other publishers who are thinking about their own platforms and what they might do might let the crown jewels out of the fence for a subscription service. And I think if you see what's happening with Netflix right now with like Disney clawing back IP to build Disney Plus, I think the gaming space is more advanced and there's much more friction for them here that they realize. And without their own individual offerings to anchor, I think they'll have a really great hit out of the gate with probably some expensive, highly paid marketing titles. But I think the ability to sustain is really questioned. I also... Sorry, is this? I want to go one other place.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
I also want to connect this to the person who should be most terrified by this announcement. And I think this is an unusual draw, but bear with me. I think if I'm a company that's most scared about this, it's Epic. And why? Because I think Epic just invested tons of money and is planning to continue to invest tons of money in a store model, right? And my concern is if this is at the moment where we now have a Netflix coming in, we have Game Pass, that maybe the store model is really going away, that the subscription model is the new model for games and game services, and that the biggest people who are at risk here are the new store models. They're going to have all the difficulty of building the store business, but they're going to be on last generation's monetization approach, right? Like, I think maybe seeing this, Epic Games might wish, hey, we should have launched as a game streaming service or had streaming elements integrated into it.
Hey, William, what if we think about this? I love that point because here's what I think secretly behind the scenes. Okay. This is your data play, right? Like somebody like Valve and with Steam or somebody like Epic with their store, they have all this data and they know this. I would argue that Epic already has a subscription model. All right. You know where I'm going with this? Because they already know they can sell a few games, right? They sell a few games during the year. They know your login and they know what you will buy, but they also have been giving away games the whole time. And I don't see any sign of that stopping. So essentially, like what they're doing is saying, okay, right now, William buys like a couple games a year, divide that by 12 months. We give away a bunch of free games along the way. We pay all those game companies for those games. Essentially, I wonder if under the hood, that's what their model is. They're just monetizing it we'll give you some free games along the way to keep you in our store all the time. You buy a few games. Essentially, that's what you're doing, right? As long as you're logging into the Epic store and spending some money every now and then.
Yeah, I see the point. Just the concern is, the positioning here is like, if like Netflix entering this market because they have so much market power for exposure to customers, right? Like literally anyone who games, like I think we've all heard subscription service for games before, because I remember when like subscription service for games has been around for a long time. People are like, you should do a, like I remember when there was like, was it like Gamefly or whatever, where you'd literally get like the, so like I think we view it as I think Netflix can bring a lot of attention and reinvigorate that model and show that model makes sense today. And my concern is, if you're Steam, you're fine. You're the entrenched ownership store. You locked in. You've amortized your costs a long time ago. But if you're Epic and you've just spent literally hundreds of millions of dollars building a store model, like imagine if I were trying to convince you that like I should be doing an online DVD or an online video purchase website today. You would say to me, no, there's Amazon. They rule that market if you want fixed own content, and everyone else is on streaming, right? And I'm taking that thought a little bit and applying it to the games market, where no, there's Steam. They own the main market for people on ownership. There's the entrenched collections in there, and everyone else is going to go to streaming. And I really do think streaming is coming, or not streaming, subscription models are coming in a big way because of the success of Game Pass. I just think the industry is awake to it. They recognize how impactful it is for Microsoft. And like, it's difficult to get going and it's difficult to get right. But I really believe that it's not just Netflix seeing the power of this. And more to the point, Netflix doing this is going to scare other people into doing this, right?
And Paul, using your mode analogy, is it also a problem that a generation or two we've lived in Steam, right? Like our games exist in Steam, and that's why Epic has started their store to compete with Steam. Is that like, I don't want to ever lose my Steam account, because like what happens to all the games that I have in my Steam account? And now
what happens to my 5,000 unplayed titles? What about World of Goo? I've been looking at that
exactly.
one.
What about Civilization 2, right? Like that's still there for me to play if I want. So,
you can't leave Civ 2. That's a classic.
Look, I've always said that the more of these stores that pop up or services, and it's no different in video. If anything, it's worse for the consumer, worse for the gamer, right? It just, like, I now have to check, because I have so many subscriptions just for games even, right? I have Game Pass. I have, 300 titles on Steam. I have all the freebies I got on Epic Game Store. So, like, if I have a friend that says, hey, let's go play Left 4 Dead, I'm like, hold on. Do I own that? Did I get it for free? Is it on Game Pass? I have to go do, like, a whole search, and I'm the Origin. I pay for like the Origin Premiere or whatever, and the EA Play and the right. So like between all these services, it's just a mess. And I think it's nonsense that it's such a mess. But I just want to push back on William's point for a second, which is I think Epic would be able to pivot to an all-you-can-eat service because of their relationship with the developers, right? I think that's the crux of those all-you-can-eat services.
Can I tie it into the operating system? They own Unreal. And I've equated GG Circuit to Unreal for folks in examples like, listen, like underneath the hood, a lot of these publishers use the Unreal Engine, right? So yeah, is that part of their secret sauce?
And where I think I push back even harder, William, is on the Netflix doing original content. Because I think you're right, that's the obvious one, right? Netflix does original content for movies. It's very successful. They do it for TV shows. It's very successful. They spend I don't know, now it's more than $1 billion now a year producing original content. I just think if they wanted to roll their own all-you-can-eat games service, and we all agree the hardest part of this is convincing the developers to come on board with their games. If Netflix in the same breath says, and by the way, we're buying this studio and we're going to spend $3 billion a year making our own games. If I'm Activision Blizzard, I'm going, whoa, hold on. You want to put, Overwatch 2 next to, and Call of Duty next to whatever game you're spending $1 billion on? No way. Right? And so, like, I feel like if anything, Netflix staying out of the original content space might allow them to bring this to market more successfully. Now, that's not to say 2 years from now or 3 years from now, they then can't roll their own content once all the developers are dependent.
That argument, Paul, I think is a dead argument. And I hear you, but I think like that's the argument. Like if that argument were true, then why did Netflix go into original content, right?
But they didn't do it day one.
No,
that's my point.
They didn't do it day one. They didn't do it one. But my point
and neither did Apple.
Neither did Apple.
Because you don't want to be seen as a threat. So you ease your way in. You're the friendly guy consolidating everything. We all work together, kumbaya. And then 3 years in, once you have all the eyeballs, then you roll your own.
See, the difference is, and I take the point, right? You're basically saying like it's, I take the point. Thing is, I think the fundamental problem here, is all the, like in that market beforehand, right? The market that you described beforehand, like all the individual TV studios, all the individual video movie studios weren't really trying as a core piece of their strategy to do their own distribution, right? But look at now every publisher you just talked about. Tell me all the services you subscribe to. Tell me, like, it's just the publishers recognize that the distribution here, because it's a much more fundamentally core digital product, right? Like they never went through the same, like they've recognized like the industry had an awakening before traditional media where they shed the pain of having to go to a GameStop to go buy a physical, GameStop, but they shed the pain of having to go to a retailer to buy, like, online. They got there earlier and they recognize controlling that distribution is powerful. That's exactly why now you have the publishers going full on at it and trying to distribute other people's games like Epic. So I just think like role play the conversation with me. Like your Netflix, I have BioWare's, I have Fallout 5 or whatever it is. Convince me to put Fallout 5 on your service.
Right, but here I'm gonna shoot you both down because I'll give you
ahead, Zach.
The other night I really wanted to watch Indiana Jones. I just had a hankering to watch it again. Okay.
Great movie. Which one though? Which one?
I was just going to start at the beginning and start watching.
First one. Oh my God. Yes.
I'm assuming they're all online, right? So I do what everybody does. All right. And follow me out here. I open up Netflix and I like, no. So then I'm like, screw this. I'm not going through everyone. So I get my Google out and I Google it and I'm like, oh, it used to be this, used to be this, used to be this, used to be this. Now it's on Paramount Plus. Well, guess what? Zaki Poo is not subscribed to Paramount Plus yet. So my point is, I think Netflix can launch this and be successful without all of the publishers on it, because in the end, like there's not a one fix all video streamer out there today anyway. Like we all subscribe to at least 3 or 4 or 5 different services because the IP spread around. I don't know of a day where all the IP exists under one thing, because that's called a monopoly. And so like, I don't know that is a good thing anyway. So
But let me make this argument more, because I'm struggling. I think there's a good point here, which is like the risk here is like, think of your Steam library again, right? And think of like I'm for everyone, right? Like it's like 3% of your Steam library is like 99% of your time played, right? Because you're like, you play the big marquee games, you buy others, you try them, you're like, not really, I'm not really feeling Crayon Physics this time, maybe right? But like, the point I'm making is the risk. I don't doubt Netflix can get gaming content, but if they're just getting all the games you don't want to play, really, they don't have a great service. And my fear is, and I'll make this argument differently, our industry has recognized the power of exclusivity for decades, starting with consoles, right? Like that's what defined, like there's this notion inherent in the industry of exclusivity and platform control. And again, unless they're able to get the biggest games, you're not going to want to subscribe to the service. I don't believe this is like the movie or TV market where there's a massive amount of long tail content and tons of people want to go back to 90s, 2000s, 10s. I think for subscription gaming to work, most people pretty much want to play the most recent games. And that's the difference here, right? That's the stuff that gets carved out to other studios in the media model.
And I'll support that, William, with data from our system, is that we have games, like we have 2,000 titles in our library across our network, right? Like there are centers that have loaded libraries of all the classic games you could want to play, and they don't get played. And we all know that, right? Like you all are like, let's go together to that new retro bar down the street. They've got an original Nintendo. We can blow on the thing. It'll be so cool. And we'll sit down and like, it's really cool for a night. Like the other night we pulled out GoldenEye and we just really wanted to play it on the 64. And like, it was a great experience. We might have had a few adult beverages and like, but like, I didn't have the urge to pick it up again the next night.
All rockets, all remote mines. Like,
right. Like the slappers only, which is slappers only.
Oh.
Like, yeah, I mean, like, Golden Gun, like all of those are great. And we all love thinking about that meme, but playing it, like I was frustrated. I was like this is not playing like I play Fortnite, right? Like I wish I could crouch and build and do some other stuff that new games can. So I think you have a great point in the fact that gamers want to play the latest and greatest.
Where are they going to get the good content? Because you can't rely on you can't rely on the long tail content the same way you can with traditional movies and film. You just can't.
Yeah.
Like everybody, I bet if I told you, do you want to watch the best picture? Like I bet there's a big market for people who want to watch the last 10 years of best pictures. Yep. I don't think there's anybody really in gaming who wants to go back and play like Fallout 2, even though it was a brilliant game at its time. They're on Fallout 4 and the market for Fallout 2 is very small. And guess what? It's GOG, right? Good old games, right? And I think that's a good business.
That is a great point. That's such a good point. And music, you look at music's the same thing, right? Music's timeless, even more than movies, right? Like,
what did Netflix, what did Apple start with? It start like their big thing was getting the Beatles on, and that's like 50, 60 years old, But again, can you imagine if I was like, well,
I'm going thumbs down on Netflix streaming. I don't think it's
we have Oregon Trail. Like, guys, we got Oregon Trail. Like, that would be the equivalent, right? You know what I mean? And like, everyone would be like, oh, Oregon Trail. I remember that was a great game.
I used to love this game. I used to play it for hours, and you're like, okay, an hour or two for nostalgia.
It's not the long tail content. Game's not the same. It's the big new content that anchors services. Yeah. And that's the stuff the publishers protect. And that's my concern. That when they have a big marketing budget out of the gate, they'll get a partner, they'll buy a couple big things, right? But the ability to sustain this is going to be a struggle. It's going to be a real struggle. And I think they can get eyeballs and I think they can get awareness for this market. I think subscription games will be a more important category going forward now. I think this might galvanize the category, but I have real concerns about their ability to do it. I really do. Again, I'm not saying they won't do it. They have the biggest advantage ever, which is literally every single person who is a gamer will know about this on day one because they'll log into their Netflix account at night and see an offer for it because Netflix has that demo. So that's a huge advantage. But content is king in these industries, and I think the content here is not a one-to-one parallel with movies and TV.
Guys, I want to move on. I want to get to one other story here. Before I do, I just want to say for our listeners, for our viewers, I would love to get comments from you guys, A, on what you think the price point for this Netflix service will be, and B, if you think they will be able to get the AAA titles, the latest and greatest, and if that is something that you would need to see to subscribe to this service. I would love our listeners' views on those two things.
Come by the live stream and vote Team Netflix, Team Notflix. Like, I'm really curious.
There you go.
Like,